Okay, so it was muted. Okay. All right. Okay, that's not, well. The next thing we have is we'll understand a little bit about pump stations. So I know that's going to be a topic we're going to talk about a little bit later. What are our pump stations? They're taking water from one zone and pumping it to somewhere else. A lot of times we try to use gravity to move the water around. And you get to the point where it gets too deep for it to be economical. Our pipes should get 20, 30, 40 feet in the ground. So what we do is we put in a lift station. So it lifts it up higher and then it can flow by gravity through to some other zone. So we have about 20 stations. We're going to add a couple more for in the future. And these are big assets, and these are like Shane has to manage these all the time. These have recurring costs, return maintenance, and they're labor intensive to manage. All right, so combined sewer, this is a big hot topic. We want to just define the terms. So it's a combination of stormwater and wastewater. They all go to a common pipe. And most of the time, as you can see, it flows right to the wastewater plant. That base flow, that always up to a certain amount, it gets treated and captured. What happens is in the CSO thing is when the system gets overwhelmed. This is one pipe in the ground. A lot of these are antiquated, so they don't have the capacity to convey all the stormwater and wastewater flows. So what happens to a portion of that, this gets discharged to receiving water. In our case, it's the river and the mill pond. So that being said, this is a problem for a lot of communities in the US. There's over 700 communities with CSOs, and we have some good information on our website in terms of our compliance, how often have we had CSOs? And we'll talk a little bit about it. We have some new notification systems and some new dashboards so the community can kind of be more aware of the real-time status of our system. All right, and I think a big question we've been getting is why do we still have CSO events? Like, we put a lot of money into the system, we put a lot of investments, why do we still have these CSO events? So what we've been seeing is we've been having more frequent intense rain events. So this is intensity. So if it rains all day, a lot of times it's not a problem. It's when you get 2 inches of, in an hour. It basically overwhelms our conveyance system because we have these antiquated pipes still. And it's not capable of conveying those flows. The reason for the CSO point is to have a relief point so that it doesn't come out in basements, doesn't come out in the street. So this is a problem in a lot of places where if you don't contain it and direct it to a location, it's going to come out where you don't want it to. I think there's a lot of history. This is from a picture from Portsmouth itself. I'm not sure if Peter actually took the picture, but it will find a way out of the system when it gets overwhelmed. So the point is that these relief points are engineered there to protect public health and safety. It's not ideal, but it's better than coming out in a basement or on the street where it's not contained. So what's discharged during a CSO event? So our CSO flows, our base flows are about 2 million gallons per day. In a wet weather event that goes to the treatment plants about 6 million. So 90% of this CSO water is actually stormwater. And then in your wastewater, most of that is water itself anyways. That being said, what's coming off in these CSO events? You have wastewater, so that's a fraction of it. But then you're also getting road runoff. You're getting fertilizer runoff from parks and other grassy areas. You're getting pet waste getting washed out. And a big one, I think, in a lot of areas and a lot of concerns in communities is a lot of wildlife near these water bodies. So geese and other waterfowl become a real problematic thing when you're starting to look at beach closures and other types of contamination of water bodies. And it's just a fun fact that a goose can produce 1 to 1.5 pounds of fecal waste per day. So you start thinking about the amount of geese that we have around here, that these things can become problematic. So, and then metals and hydrocarbons. So those are things from runoff from roads and streets and things like that. So those are all constituents of these CSOs. It's not simply wastewater. What are our current CSO locations? This is a nice, a little bit older picture, but we have CSO 10A and 10B on the mill pond. 10A has one pipe coming out there, but on 10B, it's an interesting site. There's 3 discharge pipes. One of them is CSO, but 2 of them are stormwater. So a lot of times when you see things flowing, there's a lot of stormwater that comes out of here. This is a big collection area. And it's an interesting thing. So it's kind of deceptive sometimes to see is it CSOing or not. And then Deer Street is at the end of Deer Street going out to the river there. That's a much smaller CSO. It doesn't CSO at all. And just another fact, as we were kind of putting this presentation together, typically in this South Mill Pond area, for every inch of rainfall we get about 3.7 million gallons of stormwater runoff in the basin. So there's huge volumes of runoff that are generated in this area. And so you can kind of see all the streets and the roofs and stuff. So there's a lot of impervious cover. So you can see why we have recurring CSO issues, because we have so much impervious surface that we're generating lots of runoff relative to the rainfall that we get. Okay, we're going to go through some of the projects that we've completed in the area. So, combined systems have, that's the primary driver of these CSOs. We have a lot of combined systems, but as you can see, we've really taken care of a large majority of those combined piping systems. So a few of them are still ongoing. In yellow and green, there's additional either separation projects or infiltration projects. And the one thing I want to note on this here, so see up here, the pink with the green hatch on it. So that was a basin that was totally separated. After that happened, we went out there and looked at it and saw there's additional infiltration and other things being supplied. It wasn't still wastewater. So we didn't really solve all of our CSO issue there necessarily. So the important takeaway from this is this is a big process, and it's a long-term process. Because just because you separate the system doesn't mean you solve your CSO problems. Because you still have leaky pipes, you still have sump pumps that are pumping into it, you have roof drains, you have all these other things, these other connections that can add to it. So being systematic is important, because it's better to evaluate what data you have, plan a project, but then come back and see what the results were. Because a lot of times there's other things that are still contributing to CSOs or other CSO events. Just a couple facts on sort of how we've progressed over the past 20 years or so. Since 2002, there have been 28 major sewer projects. There's a whole number of smaller ones, but about $194 million of total sewer capital investments. A lot of that is in the Pierce Island wastewater treatment plant. But approximately of that 194, about 70 million is CSO related, CSO specific. That would be separation projects, infiltration related projects, things like that. And as you can see from this, there's approximately 90% reduction. It depends really on the weather patterns. You have, in the early 2000s, you see some very high events, and they were kind of wet years. But also the data, as you get older and older, we didn't have good data to understand what the volumes and flows were. I think what I heard is that there was a kind of a board that they used. So if it got moved, that was the indication that there's a CSO. So nowadays we have better technology, better tools to understand what's actually going on in the system. So, but it does show you though that we have been working to steadily address some of these CSO flows and events. And this is just another one. We've had a really wet summer season. I'm calling May through August, say, the summer season. Let's just show you kind of where we're at. The past 10 years or so, we had some drier events, but we are seeing there was significant flows in August. We've had a lot of very intense rainfall. It's been challenging for the system. We kind of see this summer that we had some more CSOs, and there was some of those really, really intense rainfall events were very tough for our system. Oh yeah. So orange is the CSO event, and blue is the rainfall volume or rainfall depth in inches. So it's a little bit, the scale got cut off here. We can resolve that. We'll try to resolve that in there. But the big picture is, the data varies, but the trends are looking pretty good. So the thing is, these are some pictures I think that Peter took from was before your time, right? But there's been a significant reduction in street flooding and also basement flooding. This was not like a thing that happened a time per year, or this was happening very regularly based on the precipitation events that we got. So, and that's an important thing to consider, is that, CSOs are not ideal, flooding is not ideal, but in terms of the amounts and the frequency is dramatically decreased over time. All right, big one is, so when will CSOs be eliminated? And I would say we don't have a firm, we can't put a pin on it and say it will be done with this date. Like I was mentioning before, we have a supplemental compliance plan, which is our target, and it's our framework to work towards removing these CSOs, but it's a long-term process. So it's important to plan and prepare a project with data, evaluate the performance of it, and then come back and see, did it work? Do we have to do some more things, or are there other solutions that we have to investigate? And the big picture of kind of like value and philosophy is we want to prioritize projects that operate 24/7, 365. It's easy to say, oh, we're going to put in this big treatment plant here. It's going to operate maybe a couple times a year. Is that the right? Our opinion is that that's not the right solution to do right now. The best thing to do is start looking through our system. How do we continue separating systems, and how do we make sure we're managing those that collection system. And the big picture is, it's a long-term process. And, you start thinking about planning projects, delivering projects, gathering data takes time. Planning a project, designing a project, all this takes significant time. We don't want to be in a position where we're being reactive. We want to have a good strategic philosophy and kind of work forward through it. So it's a long-term process. And right now we don't have a date. The goal is to work towards that in that direction and try to improve over time. All right, so the big one too, and I think we got a lot of feedback, is how do we get better notifications out to the community? So we have a vendor that helps us with CSO reporting and monitoring. They also manage the rain gauge system. And so we have new tools available to us where we have a real-time dashboard on the city's website now. So if you have any interest, go to the city's combined sewer overflow website, and we have a real-time map of all of our CSO locations. You can click on each point. You can see when was the last time it had a CSO, what have been the volumes in the past periods of time. And then they have, it's kind of like, has it overflowed in the last 48 hours and such, those are right there. We're implementing a new notification system itself. So we're trying to automate subscribers to make sure we don't miss people. We're getting notifications out effectively. And we have systems in place that we can verify that it's not a false. We had a couple of those where there was a sensor failure. We just don't want to say like, oh, there's a CSO, but there's really not. So we have some tools in place that we have additional monitoring and data that we can say, okay, this is a real thing. Let's make sure everyone's aware of it. They're going live this week. So I think to expect anyone who signed up on our website will get a notification saying, hey, the system's going live. If you want to still be subscribed, great. If not, you can unsubscribe. There'll be a way to do that. And other thing to emphasize, and I know we get some comments on it, is the old systems, they met our regulatory and reporting requirements. So it might not have been the preferred notifications, but we still met our requirements. So, but I think there's always room for improvements. I think this is a good tool where we can get a little bit more information out to people and be kind of responsive and respect people's requests. All right, another one too is we had some recent flooding events that have been pretty intense. So especially in August, I'll just use this as an example. We've had some pretty intense events. This was a particularly impressive one. We got 2 inches of rain in 2 hours, and we got 1.5 inches in an hour. So these type of things, we have high impervious cover, like I was saying, downtown, right? You get 3.7 million gallons. That's just in that little basin. We have a bunch of other watersheds around. So start looking at that impervious cover, and it generates huge amounts of stormwater. So both the storm drainage system and the wastewater systems were overwhelmed, and the combined system as well. So one particular area in the Maplewood area, Fleet Street, we have a stormwater CSO separation project in the works. It's under design right now. So we have areas that we know we have capacity issues, so we're working on addressing them. So these are big projects, though. They take time, and there's a lot of permitting and property issues that we have to resolve to get these things on the ground. Next one is Mechanic Street Pump Station. This has taken up a lot of our city's time and our staff's time. It's the city's biggest pump station, and it's been a real challenge. I think it's a visible mark that we're having. We have some issues in our conveyance system. So this station was originally constructed. It's had a series of upgrades in the 70s, and then the early 90s, and then in the 2000s as well. So right now, the current big pumps here, these pumps are about 500 horsepower. These were manufactured in the early 90s era. We've had some pump failure issues. So this is the pump right here, and this is just the motor that drives. So these things are about 15 feet tall. They pump about 22 million gallons per day. Their capacity decreases as they wear. And these are big rotating pieces of equipment. These were the largest dry pit submersible pumps in the country. So these were like serial number 2 and 3, custom made in Germany. So with these failures, we had failures of this internal seals, and those on the left side, that's called the stator. The wire, these wires, some of them, these things are basically at their end of life, and we're just trying to make sure that we get them repaired and back in service as soon as we can. So right now we ship them offsite. I think a lot of the community was notified. So these are big pumps. This is just the motor and impeller, this is the upper unit. They got shipped off off-site. A lot of these parts, this is made in Germany. So these parts are handmade or custom manufactured. So some of the parts were taking 4 months, some have taken up to 6 months. The rebuild is in process, but as we're rebuilding, we found some additional electrical issues. So they have, going back to this stator here, each one of those little wires, there's thousands of wires, that's hand wound by hand. So that's still in process, and that's projected to take another 3 months still. Because this is custom stuff where you're slotted in the queue with hydropower generators, a bunch of these really weird one-off custom pieces of equipment. So right now the big visual reminder that it's not operating as it normally does is temporary pumps in the yard. So we have a secondary pump behind that fence that is operating. That's our standard pump that's there. That's where we're working as like our duty pump. And we have these two big engine driven pumps, metal enclosures. Those are sound deadening enclosures. And they only turn on when we have a rainfall event. So when wet weather. So the flows come up and we need to pass additional flow. That's where it is. And then the tarps there, it's kind of a little bit unsightly, but those tarps have a little insulation and we have heat trace wires. We want to make sure the pipes don't. And that's why it's not ideal, but it keeps the pipes flowing and it makes sure that we don't have any reliable those specific units. So it was unfortunate. It was an untimely failure of the equipment because there's a current project underway. We're at the 90% level. We were designing parts repairs, upgrades, and other things and reliability improvements at the site. So this is a sort of an extreme example, like failure example. So I think what we're doing and what we've learned from this is that probably a more comprehensive upgrade is necessary versus just a pump, a parts replacement or an electrical component replacement. So I think right now we're kind of recentering our path forward and probably have a more involved public process to define a bigger CIP project for us. So I think this will come out to the community, and we'd like to get feedback from the community on sort of our proposed options forward. But this right now, I think we're trying to get the parts replaced right now just to get the facility back online. But then we'll come back out and kind of talk a little bit more about maybe a more comprehensive project. All right, so we're going to jump over to treatment systems. So this is talking about the Pierce Island plant specifically. I think there's been some comments regarding that. So, why do we have treatment plants? So this is taking, wastewater or combined sewage and treating it from, kind of like a dirty place to a clean place. That's, for instance, to remove particulate matter, remove rags, flushable webs that shouldn't be flushed, other things like that from the water, sands and grits and rocks and stuff like that. We get those removed in the early phases. Settle out organic material and those two big clarifiers. It's something to note too that those clarifiers, well, I'll talk about another slide, are original to the original plant. And I'll compare that stuff a little later, but we're really trying to remove the pollutant components and concentrate that treatment in one spot for discharging to the water body. All right, so in just terms of like spatially where these things work. So Dave's here and he works out of the Pease wastewater plant. That's over in Pease Tradeport area. So that treats mainly the Pease Tradeport, and there's a few other customers around there. And then it gets discharged all the way up to an outfall river up there. And then the Pierce Island facility covers most of Portsmouth and then discharges right out into the channel there. And then those are the 3 CSO locations. So the Pierce Island treatment plant. So it was constructed in the late 70s. And this is just a comparison. That's the new plant up on the top, and that's the old plant too. There's a lot of similarities here. So when we talk about some of these facilities, this is a 24/7, 365 facility. Like when you do these upgrades, you can't really take the treatment offline. So you start looking at this, and most facilities, it's series of upgrades over time. So the new facility has a capacity of about 6 mgd to do secondary treatment. So the original plant was just primary treatment, which means it went through clarifiers, and then it got disinfected and discharged. It has a wet weather capacity of 21 mgd. So this is where the system operates in sort of 2 modes. The first mode, it runs all the way through the facility, gets disinfected and discharged. And then in the wet weather mode, the 6 million gallons goes through the full treatment, and then a portion of that flow goes to the primary clarifiers, gets disinfected and discharged. So right now we have a new draft permit. It's not in effect yet. But we have a good detailed video tour from when the facility went live. That's on the website, and I didn't put the link in there. So I will update that link to make sure if you're interested in looking through the fly through the site, it's a really cool video. And we can't do it justice. I mean, just talking about this site would be a couple-hour presentation in itself. So Peace Treatment Facility, this one here is a little bit busy, but just to show, like, this is very similar to how Pierce Island is. It's a patchwork of various upgrades over time. This was constructed in the 50s for the Air Force, updated, over various periods. It has a 1.2 MTD design capacity, and we have a new active permit, which gives us a little bit extra capacity for future growth. So, I mean, you can see it's a little bit of everything, but this is these are our 2 treatment facilities, and they're currently, ongoing, and we never stop treating. Okay, so how's the Pierce Island wastewater treatment plant? I think it's been a question we have. Since the upgrade, we have dramatic performance increases. So this is going from a primary treatment facility or a chemically assisted primary treatment to a secondary treatment with a kind of a high rate filtration system. So if you can see, this is order of magnitude improvements to suspended solids in BOD or biological oxygen. So that it's kind of a weird term, actually. We didn't really define it, but essentially it's like if you put all this wastewater into our body, like how much oxygen do the bugs or the bacteria take and consume? That's what usually leads to, like fish kills. You see like fish kills in receiving waters. That's usually because of BOD. That's because there's a big algal bloom and all the microbial growth happens and it sucks all the air out, and then fish or other organisms struggle. And then the big one for us too is nitrogen removal. We've decreased total nitrogen coming out of the back end of the pipe by about 75%. And this is really helping estuary water quality. And I think both facilities have really seen dramatic improvements. On the P side, it's been operator improvements, and this one here, there's in a Pierce Island, it's been a lot of technical improvements. All right, so I know this has been a hot button one. I think I mentioned it at one of the council meetings. So the primary clarifiers, there's a scraper mechanism inside there. So when the solids, clarifier acts as like a big wide spot in the pipe. So the water comes in and all that stuff settles down, the solids settle out to the bottom. And there's this rotating scraper at the bottom that directs all those solids to a point in the middle that we suck out, dewater, and get rid of. So we had a failure of the bearing unit itself on there. So what happens is those scrapers can't rotate properly. So what we've done is we've had the mechanism removed and it was refurbished off-site. We got a new one as well. And actually, the good news, we got notification from the manufacturer that it was shipped today. So it's been delayed many times. They've been having staffing issues, and so it's been a challenge trying to get those units back. But again, though, these are old units. These were slated for the year on the CIP in 2 years. So there was going to be a whole replacement of both units and those clarifiers in was a fiscal 26. And it just, again, like Mechanic Street, it was unfortunate that these units, they failed before we could just replace them. So kind of it's more of a timing thing. All right, so how has the performance been impacted? So this happened sort of in the January timeframe. So, we have data here. So with these facilities, they're 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365. We built in redundancy. Like the reason for having 2 clarifiers is you can operate off of 1 clarifier, or you can even operate in other scenarios. But you can see here that our treatment performance has not really had any changes. Really, the impacts it has been to the community. It's really because we are using that tank in a standard scenario. So the wastewater sits in that tank a little bit longer before we can clean it up and wash it down. So that's why I think some people have smelled some things. We're trying to really work on making sure it doesn't go septic, but it happens pretty quick in a wastewater. Next slide. All right, and I think another question we've been getting is, do we have capacity for new development in the city? There's a lot of new construction. Can we handle it? I think in terms of capacity of our treatment facilities, yes, we can. They were designed for growth time. And then Pease also has a additional permitted capacity available if we do need it there. But the big takeaway is our sewer use trends have been down. We're getting less. There's about 10% less sewer use, and we have about 10% more customers. So as you can see, so the new development hasn't really been adding new sewer capacity to the system, sewer requirements to the system. So and a lot of that comes through, more efficient fixtures, toilets, showers, things like that. And it's an important thing to note that all these, commercial buildings or apartments and other things, they haven't been increasing the flows to our conveyance and treatment system. All right, and I'm going to hand it over to Brian. we're gonna talk a little bit, how do we pay for this work? How do we make sure it's cost effective?
Great. Thank you, Eric. That's a good segue to mention blue. So we are saying think blue. And that's one aspect of, water, wastewater, stormwater, getting the message out there, water efficiency. So I think, we can attribute a bit of the reduction in usage to how much our customers have really, worked on water efficiency. I also want to say, Eric's been with us 9 months. When he came here, I think he knew where Portsmouth was, but he didn't know anything about our wastewater system. So, you could walk away from this meeting going, you got to be kidding, because, and maybe that's why we put him on the hot seat to make the presentation. So we'd have to really learn this stuff right and left, but it's amazing. And we're very fortunate to have him with us in his experience too. He was in Seattle for 10 years, managing their pump stations there. So anyway, says I'm muted, but I don't think I am. Am I muted, Monty? No. Okay. The paying for all this. So many of you have seen this graphic. David Hyder, our rate consultant, has worked with us for a number of years now, and we've implemented what we like to call our steady state rate setting policy using a glide path approach. And we've got some examples. There's two ways really to fund these big capital projects. The close to $200 million of capital money doesn't come out of nowhere. And also, we have operating costs that go up every year as well. So we have to plan for those. And part of that has been to establish a net position glide path approach. And that is to raise your rates a little bit ahead of projects, maybe more money than you need today, but you need the money, 3 to 5 years from now to pay for these big projects like the Pierce Island upgrade. Or you can just say, okay, we'll wait for that upgrade and we'll wait for that bill to come and start paying for it then. So the green line is that steady state where you end up at the same place in the end, or you can raise your rates as you go. So here's an example of some Seacoast systems, and the hatched ones are the pay-as-you-go examples, and the other three are more, following this kind of steady state. So Newmarket, they're in the red. Dover is in the yellow, and we're in the green. So those are the percent rate increases from 2017 to 2022. But the other, Somersworth and Durham, have done more the pay-as-you-go, raise rates as needed as projects come in. And really the dramatic different example would be Exeter. So Exeter didn't really establish a policy ahead of time. So as you can see, they've had to close to double the rates. And I know they do still have some capital work ahead of them. So we've been taking that approach. And here's the actual rates and the actual trend over time since the implementation of that. So we really have been following that glide path approach. And we feel that that's really helped us with that. And we are going to continue that. So to kind of sum things up, there are other opportunities. There's, as Eric said, there's so much more to wastewater, but we covered in a lot of other aspects. We have the 6-year CIP. We have the permits that are active. We have other things we bring before council regarding policy and regulatory compliance needs and the long-term plans. So again, we'll have the 6-year capital plan that has a lot of sewer in it, has a lot of continued projects on the sewer separation. We've got the long-term control plan coming up. We also, with the new permit, we have William in his new position as the IPP FOG coordinator. We're upping that program. So fats, oils, and grease, we now have the active permit with all the restaurants that just went live September 1. So William's been very busy with that. And we'll be updating the sewer ordinance soon as part of our regulatory requirement. We have to update that, submit it to EPA in a timely manner. They'll review it and then comment and get it that. So, and then of course, when we get to the very big projects that, need bonding money, we go back before council on that. So I'm going to wrap up saying we are, before the meeting, we talked with staff, we're getting ready for the storm this weekend. We really have no idea whether it's going to be a big hit. We know it's going to make big waves. So hopefully that's maybe all we see, but we could get 2 to 4 inches of rain. We might get some wind, but we'll do our best to track the storm and stay the best ahead of it as we can. And hopefully don't have to test the new CSO activation system. So with that, I'm going to let Suzanne get back up here. She's going to do the Q&A. Due to the setup we have with the room, I'm going to stop share. All we're going to have, there we go, well, is for the viewers out there, we don't have a microphone in the audience because the setup is literally being, operating from this computer here with that. So what we'll ask is Suzanne will take questions and she'll repeat them and do our best to answer. So thanks for coming, and I'll turn it back over to Suzanne.
Thanks. And Eric, if you want to come up, because I'm guessing most of these are going to be you or other members of the team. So what I'll do is, if you are interested, if you have a question, we'll be glad to raise your hand, and I will do my best to recognize you, and I may wind up repeating the question. The other possibility is, if you'd like to write down the question and pass it up, that's another option. If you don't take the right pad around. So we're kind of, I'll work with whatever is most effective. So you can either raise your hand and I'll do my best to see if I can either summarize the question so we can get it on the tape, or if you want to write it down, I'm happy to take it that way. So. Okay. My question is, who wants to answer that one? So for the record, as we try and capture this, so the question from the audience member was a question with regard to what rules might exist with regard to redevelopment of sites and how stormwater is treated or handled and considered when sites are redeveloped. How to prevent runoff onto sites. Is that good? Okay.
Yes.
Take that.
Thank you. That's specific to stormwater. We did have a stormwater work session, and on the city's website there is a recording of that. But yes, any development, some of this commercial development downtown or redevelopment, they have to have what's called a stormwater management plan for their construction. So that manages all the stormwater during construction, but then the larger projects have to have a permit to put BMPs, best management practice. So places have been putting rain gardens in, forest pavement, capture. They can't increase the runoff that goes to the neighboring properties.
Right.
Yeah. Well, Peter can add to it.
Some of the smaller projects you had asked about auxiliary dwelling units or accessory dwelling units, and they do not always get captured relative to stormwater. However, the city ordinance does have requirements relative to runoff from one property to another. So if a project impacted another property, say they built something and all of a sudden all the stormwater was coming onto your property as a result of that, there'd be option for recourse against that other property. But the smaller projects where it's based on the square footage in terms of, so it's typically the larger projects get captured, but the smaller ones aren't always there. But as Brian can speak to, and you'll be seeing in the future, we're putting together additional stormwater requirements and potentially an enterprise fund to an alternative way to manage the stormwater funding, which will be more restrictive relative to runoff in a smaller square footage. So.
Any other questions?
Policy regarding septic how they provide properties and converting them to their
So the question for the recording that has come from the public is a question with regard to septic systems and how they're regulated and what the availability is or the impact is when the sewer line for the main is available.
I can also go
Do you want to talk to that?
history. Typically, we like to require, if there's a sewer line in proximity to your property, like to have that connected. I think there's certain requirements in the ordinance to do that. We've had some recent projects where we've tried to do those separations, and there have been some agreements where they're not required, but if there's property transits or other things like that, we're trying to make sure that those get switched over. But yeah.
Specifically relative to the regulation of septic systems, that is a state function. The city does not address that unless it's a failing system, and our health officer will get involved.
I will say the city did do a major sewer extension out on Sagamore Avenue in that area. And the city councils, both past and present, have put additional money in the budget to help incentivize owners to connect to the new line. So there has been a demonstrated commitment from the city council to help provide incentives for the connection of septic, getting off the septic and connecting to the new sewer mains.
And so just to jump into septic systems in general are a large contributor to water quality issues and receiving waters. So it's a noted contributor to biological activity, so algal blooms, things like that, and also beach closures and such. So those are things where it might not be visible, but it is a contributor to water quality issues and receiving waters.
How many do you know where your islands that are treated during the wet weather event where they are bypassing land and rain? If you do have the capacity to chart the number of gallons that you treat that way, how many gallons have you treated so far this year during wet weather events here at Island? And part of that question obviously is looking at South Mill Farm and how far along are you in the long-term that should have been complete by 23, 24?
So do you want to describe bypass first and what you know, and then I can talk about the consultant?
So
Yes, sorry. Yes, I should. Thank you. Yep. So the question, a couple of questions from the audience, from the public, regarding how the bypass works at the Pierce Island wastewater treatment facility when there are large flows to the treatment facility during intense rain events, and if we know the volume that has bypassed the full treatment train at the Pierce Island plant. And the third question relates to the the supplemental compliance plan related to the long-term plan. And
the third one. Okay.
no, it's the
All right. So the thing at the island, all the waste flows are treated. They're treated to different degrees. So let's go back to the figure. It's probably easier to kind of visualize it. Okay, it's right in the beginning here. Okay.
Gotta share.
All right.
Good old Zoom.
All right. So this is maybe
Sharing.
just go back.
Zoom. Stop share. Try another method. Get this one.
All right, well, we can talk through it. So remember how we were talking about we had clarifier issues? So it comes through, the pipe comes in, there's a couple of buildings, those two big round
There we
clarifiers.
go. All right, skip it. Technical issues.
Okay, so how is it still presenting that? Okay, so goes through two, so you have primary treatment, so we're taking the rags, the rocks, the other things out. Then it goes to grit, which is the sand and dirt like that. Then it goes to the two big round clarifiers. All the flow goes through that. Doesn't matter if it's wet weather, dry weather, anything. It always goes through there. The facility continues to operate, so that 6.13 MGD capacity, it continues to operate. If it exceeds that capacity, the portion gets split. There's a kind of a box.
Actually starts at closer to 10 MGD.
Correct.
Not
Because
6.1. They're able to push, instead of just limiting to 6.1, they actually push up to 10.
up to a couple hours. For a few
Yeah,
hours.
for a few hours. So they can push that much more.
Right.
Before it starts to vibrate.
Correct. And then so that blending treatment, so it's I think it kind of like is like a wet weather treatment phase. So after it goes to the clarifiers, then it goes to those chlorine contact tanks. So we're dosing it with disinfectant to kill the microbial growth or microbial life in there. So we're treating it one fraction of it over on the standard secondary treatment. The other one is sort of a primary treatment with a really heavy dose of disinfectant before it goes out the pipe. We track that, that gets reported to the state. So we have good real-time data for both of those flow streams. We have flow meters on both sides of it. So we have good accurate accounting. We track that. I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but we can provide those because we have it in our SCADA system. We report it to the state. So every on a daily basis. Pardon? Yeah, we have a report. So I think we can post that as well. And maybe that's something we'll attach with this presentation when we put it on the website.
I also think it'd be important to clarify that the two treatment trains are blended at the end of the pipe, and we do meet permit limit even during the pipe. So even though there may be a portion of the flow that is bypassing the full treatment train, at the end of the pipe, we are still meeting the permit. And that is very important. The key, we're under the limits.
Right. In terms of long-term, you want to do that one? Yeah.
Yep. So back in 2017, the city submitted to the Environmental Protection Agency a supplemental compliance plan. So what had happened is the city had done an evaluation of how well we had done with our separation efforts. What were the flows looking like? Where did we need to take our next steps in order to reduce the number of CSO events? So as part of that, the city submitted a plan with a variety of projects outlined. And we reported on those monthly, which you'll see actually on the website in our monthly reports. And what occurred really over the last kind of year and a half, is that when we looked at the Fleet Street Basin, one of the things that became clear is that we needed to do more there rather than less. And that the way to kind of deal with all the infrastructure challenges as well as the separation that we wanted to accomplish is that we needed to make it a bigger project. So actually we have applied to the EPA to ask for additional time to do that Fleet Street project because it has grown in size and in scope and what we'd like to accomplish. In addition, we're still doing what we call inflow and infiltration improvements, which means replacing old pipe because old pipe often takes in groundwater. And so part of what we're trying to do as well is do more of those projects before we do another evaluation of the whole system and figure out what the next scope of projects is. So the goal is let's do a few more projects, get them done right, get them done well. Then we'll do our big evaluation because as you saw and Eric showed, sometimes you do the work and then you discover maybe it doesn't produce everything you expect in terms of, how the system's going to operate, or maybe it does better. So that is kind of the process that we're looking at right now. And we've had, like I said, we've done some other projects and bigger projects over the last 5 years, and EPA and DES and other stakeholders are aware that the city has been putting a lot of investment in our separation projects and our other environmental projects. So there is an outstanding request, and we're expecting to get that more formalized, but that's where that stands.
There has been standards that. But actually. And there is maybe there's nothing going on. So I guess I'd like to know about that. I'd like to know what you feel, as you're not going to treatment, how that might be affecting our youth. And I would also like to know what your time frame is. Because the big concern is about. One side. There's something, and I have some things happening. Anticipation that there was everything except for peace. Also, so yeah, exactly. What is the estimation of those? My last budget year that was all earnings are coming in. Area, but 3 of those. So during a long time ago, when they were really originally designing it, my question is there a point where we have to look at 3 again, or are we able to keep the needs of all the cities coming into our system? And with that said, I wasn't quite sure when you said we're losing 10% or the same 10%. I guess I'm not quite sure about that. That trying to stay there because I gained more than 10% population potentially in your livable unit, and in commercial development. So I'm trying to figure that out.
Okay, and so for the record, I'll try and just summarize, and maybe as we answer it, maybe a bit kind of back and forth here. So first off, there was a question with regard and asking for a little more explanation in terms of the odor issues that some sections of the city have been experiencing, and asking for a little more clarification and really confirmation, which I think Eric can provide, that there has been no illegal dumping or discharges. Any discharges that happen in our sewer system, when they, as they have happened in the past, there have been events where we found leaks. Those get reported. They're required to be reported. So there have been, if I'm wrong, there's been no leaks in the system that have required reporting. So I think Eric we'll start with that piece first. Let's talk about the Mechanic Street pump station a little more and the clarifiers. So do you want to hit that first, and then we can circle back to some of the other items?
Yeah, so our team, so Shane and others at the wastewater plant, so we've got initial notifications. We haven't had recent ones in terms of order complaint issues, at least that hasn't come to us. When we went around, it looked like Mechanic Street doesn't really produce the odors. We have the wastewater contained in covers and things like that. we have an odor control system on that, on the facility. Our understanding is that the odors are coming from that clarifier. The clarifier, because we can't scrape the sludge out, we have to let it fill up and dewater it physically after a storm event has occurred. So I think the first couple of times it had a little bit of a smell because we let it sit for a day or so, because these pumps are sludge pumps. They run pretty slow. There's really a lot of solids to them. They heat up and they overheat easily. But I think our guys have recently been basically rinsing them down and trying to wash them out as soon as possible after the rain event has passed. So that being said, like I haven't heard anything of in the past couple of months about that. We had a couple notifications and then we made sure we locked down our response plans. But it's not associated with the pump station, is our understanding, and the clarifier mechanism is it'll get replaced. It hasn't come over to me specifically, so.
So is there, if you have complaints, what is the process when people have complaints?
There's something online. W directly at 603-427-5030, and the odors, the complaints will get to us, we'll investigate. The challenge with odors, as you know, is there are many sources of odors, and it also is dependent upon weather, wind, how dense the air is at the moment. So odors could be smelled in one area, and you may be a half a block away, you may not smell anything. So it's challenging to chase down and find the sources, but we are aware of the challenges with that clarifier, and we're working on addressing it. You had mentioned dumping, illegal dumping, as potentially a source. Well, nothing's dumped from the city system directly without treatment. So if you're implying or saying that it was a city dump, that did not happen. If you're saying that somebody else may have had a truck out there dumping somewhere, that I would say call the police and ask them to do a quick check in the area, because that's a big deal if somebody's illegally dumping. And we have seen people do that. And it's a major concern. We want to make sure that's nipped, they get arrested and held accountable.
Yeah, this facility doesn't, we don't do set foods receiving. There's no orders from that. You also mentioned some reliability. So one single point of failure on the pipeline. There's a parallel pipe there. So there's two pipes in the ground. I think that's an important thing. And that's something that when we look as good asset managers and work on improving our infrastructure is making sure we don't have single points of failures and slowly resolve them. So that's where at Mechanic Street, we had two pump problems, but we have a third pump still functioning. And then we brought in backups to back that up. So that's what we're always looking for, is because we always have to be operating. We need to make sure we have those levels of redundancy, and we do, and that's what we're shooting for. We're shooting for not having those single points of failure. Right now we have three pumps at Mechanic Street. We have one of the three of the pump stations is functioning, and we have two backup pumps in the yard. And those are the metal boxes with the pipes running to them. So we have three pumps currently active there. But the temporary pumps are only active during rainstorms.
So you asked about and that potential beach closures. As Suzanne pointed out, blended flow, and as Eric said, they're treated, they're disconnected, and they're monitored. So we can know for certain that bacteria is not coming from any of the closures are not coming from. So that's something that you need to feel good about. And the challenge is, there's all this excess rain. Septic systems are failing. Yeast population are a real issue. So that's the main driver behind those types of beach closures. You also asked about timing on the pump station getting fixed.
Right. So I think the first step is to get those main pumps back in operation. So we still are out. The estimate from the shop to do the rewindings on the motors is still 3 months out. So we're not going to be back in full capacity or with the designed pump system until probably December timeframe. That being said, the project for upgrades, I think what we're going to do is try to progress that one faster than we thought we were going to. We thought we had a couple more years. So we don't have an answer on the timing for that yet, because that depends sort of on the scope and what we think is, and when we work with our vendors in the community, what's the right solution for this to make sure we don't have these type of failures and we can ensure reliability. So,
So then finally, you asked about the tree clarifiers.
Yeah.
I don't recall ever discussion of tree clarifiers at Pierce Island. I know we talked about a third SBR at Keys. So that may be what you're thinking of.
Okay.
From my recollection, did we talk about a third clarifier?
I think what you're referring to is the Huber press, so the solids press. So it was designed to have 3 presses. So it's funny when you think about a wastewater plant, it's not just water going through, it's water with waste. So you're basically at each step, you're taking out a waste stream, taking out a waste stream. And all that waste streams, what we do is we press out the water and we take those solids and we bring those to a landfill and then the water gets recirculated. So I think what we're referring to is there was 3 in the design, and during the value engineering process, one of those 3 was removed. And I think it's in the CIP to add it in, because with that, our operators are running the presses during most working hours. We don't have any sort of ability to lose one or have downtime type thing. So we're operating them too frequently. So having a third will kind of improve our pressing process. And I would say in terms of clarifiers, there really isn't real estate to add another one unless it goes outside the footprint of the fence, I think is my understanding.
By council that we shall not do.
And the question on usage, so, actual numbers, so that usage number, so every sewer customer has a meter, so your water metered use is what your sewer bills are based on. So in FY12, now this is in units, so the way we bill, there were 1,173,423 was FY12, and for FY22 it was 1,073,523. So about a 10% reduction, which is very similar to what we're seeing on the water side. Again, we're seeing efficiencies there. And in FY12 we had just over 6,000 customers, and right now we have close to 6,800.
Frankly, I think this is a good shout out to the fact that this community has been really good about water conservation, changing out those older appliances. Brian has been, rolling and pushing out those, change out, those old washing machines and those old toilets for the local toilets. And so we've really done a lot. And actually, Portsmouth throughout the state is known for really being at the forefront of its, water efficiency programs. And this is where you're seeing part of that, result, the benefit of that extra work by staff to kind of move that conversation along. So.
Filed an application. I heard correctly that what we would like to more formally do is create another CSO. And is that the large outfall behind the long summer?
So it would not be a CSO. It would be a stormwater outfall. And that is part of the challenge of sort of doing more, which is we need to upgrade and improve that stormwater outfall, put in a new outfall.
It's the
Second parallel one. It is not a CSO. It will not have wastewater, just rainwater. And we are, the design or, early designs are, it has treatment, as required, given current regulations and our intention to, remove pollutants from stormwater.
And that's one thing why the project is sort of expanded in scope. It's important to make sure we capture that. We don't want to leave some little portion or some part of it still combined. And that's a big thing. We don't want it to be a CSO. We want it to be a storm outfall. There's a good opportunity to totally separate that system out. That doesn't mean that we're not going to have inflow issues or other pipes. So those are those things where we do that project and we still might have to come back, gather some data and see are there other places that we need to focus our efforts. So again, it's like that long-term plan. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Placing the pump right now under what you're actually actually building what's currently there? I understand how old it was, right around 60 years old. So my
91,
question- My question is, what's the ETA on the rebuild? And what are your plans moving forward, I guess, to get a new one or get into the CIP or get an estimate to the council so we know kind of expenses coming down the line? And what, if you're gonna move it up, at what point in time are you gonna do that? And, when do you really estimate that, we function again and manage it? So if you're going out 3 months for just the repairs here, that's in December. So then can we say that we're gonna be fully functional at that point in time? Or are we gonna have another kind of surprise there and have to go out for a large expenditure in a new pump? The other question on that is what kind of backup do we have down there? My understanding was that we didn't really have backups down there. That's what we have in all that other stuff that's outside. So could you please explain how that fits in also?
So the question from the public is looking for a little more detail in terms of the Mechanic Street pump station, its current condition and plans moving forward.
So the pump station designed to have 2 pumps. So you have a duty and a standby. So the backup was one of those big pumps. And then the third one in the yard was basically, because those pumps, at low flows, rather than have them turn on and turn off, you have a little bit more turn down. So that third one is basically like a third redundancy. So that third one can handle most of the flows except for significant rain events. So the redundancy, you have 2 redundant pumps, essentially. One of those pumps should be able to pump most of the flow or all the flow at the facility. And that's how it operates. In terms of rebuilding, the pumps were replaced in 1991. So they're, I don't know, 30 something years old. You're right though. So you're thinking they're coming back, they're rewinding them and replacing components. Is it a good value for your dollar? And the reason why that was, the rebuild was selected in the interim is because it's, when you replace the pumps, it's not just replacing the pumps. To do that, to get those pumps to work, you have to redo all of the piping, all of the valves. You have to redo all the electrical systems. So the variable frequency drives, you have to redo the electrical service. So it's not just this one thing, it becomes this cascade of things. So the interim project, as it was anticipated, was to replace parts to get us through a little bit longer horizon so that the bigger project could be planned, budgeted for, and things like that. In terms of timeframes, so the parts come back in say 3 months. So say it takes another month or so to get everything installed, test it out, certified, make sure it's functional. We want to let it run for about a month, make sure there's no electrical things that come back, software issues. So you're looking about 4 months to get those rebuilt equipment back in place and operable. So that's the time frame. In terms of time frame for the bigger project, I think right now, because of the type of failure that we saw, we're going to have to pivot in terms of our planning. I think we have a big kickoff design. That other project was at about the 90% level, so we're going to pivot. We have some pump station experts, some kind of national experts coming in, and we're working on understanding sort of various scenarios that we can work with. What are the things that we need to do to get through the next few years? What's the right amount of work that we have to do? And is it a new facility? Is it a totally revamp of the current facility? And understanding how we can make that work. That's still in process. So that time frame we don't have. But I know you've been on the council before. These projects take a long time. So even if you say I'm ready to go and I know what I'm going to do, it takes a year or so to get a design together. Then you have to work with the community. We have to get feedback from the community. Say that's 6 months a year. You start thinking about these projects. Even if we have exactly the plan that we want in place today, it still takes several years to even implement it. So we need to make sure it works now. We bring back those pumps, make sure they're functional, and then we can then, plan for the bigger project in the future.
And just to reiterate, the short-term project, which we were in design for, we're putting that on hold. And we're saying we need to acknowledge that a larger project needs to be done. So what Eric was saying is we're pulling together some experts to start brainstorming what the scope of that bigger project is going to be so we can move it forward more quickly and come to council in the near term. We've also applied for best congressional set-asides for money to move forward on the bigger project at this location. And we weren't successful, but they understand the importance of this pump station. So we are, we are, originally we were thinking about the pump station being done around the same time as the bridge, because the bridge needs to be replaced in about 10 years. So we were hoping to stretch it out in that time period for a number of reasons. One, the neighborhood just, got through a major treatment plant project. We didn't want to burden the community with doing another big project in that immediate location. But based on the experience that we've had with these pump failures, we're realizing that we don't really have the luxury of waiting that kind of time frames. We need to start planning for the near-term upgrades.